Hi everyone, my name is Madison Macias and I'm an undergraduate mechanical engineering student at Arizona State University, and I'm also a student researcher with Re-Engineered. Re-Engineered is an interdisciplinary team that seeks to embed social justice, ecological holism, and peace into all of our engineering and science applications. It's a team led by aerospace engineering PhD Darshan Karwat, and I'm here today to share with you a project called When Mental Walls Lead to Physical Walls, and this seeks to explore the role that engineers play and engineering firms play in building infrastructure that has lasting social, economic, environmental impacts on infrastructures that we build, like border walls. And the results from this research are what I'm going to show to you today. So, this project is comprised of 3 stations, the first being the title of our whole installation, When Mental Walls Lead to Physical Walls, and it displays a quote from George Ishii of Gaslighting. And this reads, "There could be a political backlash, but we are in business to make money and put people to work and provide a good service. Whether it's a wall or substation or airport or prison, we don't want to approach it from a political standpoint, only from a business standpoint." And then on the back of this first station, it shows the engineer's notebook. And this was an intentional design to kind of show the technical border between the social implications that comes from that technical border, from the engineer's mind and from the engineering firm that chooses these decisions. Station 2 is our Museum of Walls, and this takes guests through a brief but multi-perspective history of border walls, including the prototypes that were proposed for the current US-Mexico border wall to be expanded. It also takes patrons through historical border walls across the world. Station 3 is called the Wall of Thoughts, and this invites guests to leave their opinion, and it's guided by 2 questions. These are the 2 questions. What is the role of engineering and engineering in society? Engineers and engineering in society, and what would you like to ask or say to an engineer or company working on the US-Mexico border wall? Now, of course, I can't give you the best overview of this project just by describing it to you, so I'm going to ask you to bring your attention to this clip that'll give you kind of what our first installation looked like and what some of those responses we got were.
So I was really drawn to this idea of how mental walls that we build up in our minds can lead to the construction of physical walls. And then in turn, how these physical walls shape how we interact with each other, how we interact with our landscapes. And my interest as an archaeologist is all about the human experience. And so in this case, I'm interested in the experience of the engineers when they're designing their products, the decisions they make, the values they have. I'm interested in the experiences of the people who are affected by what they design and what they create.
The administration in our government currently is working on the wall, putting billions of dollars, trillions of dollars into the construction of this. There should be so many other solutions to this, in my opinion. Engineers can resort to so many other projects that could possibly help our society in America, rather than separate us from the world even further.
For the engineers, I would say do a good job, but be questioning whether or not this is particular work you would want to take. And for the companies, and in my field, there's some business I don't take because it's not anything I want to be involved in. The guys who own those companies can decide whether or not they want to be involved in it. Scientists, certainly as moral individuals, may choose to opt in or out of a project, but when we think of probably the greatest moral conundrum in the modern era is when Oppenheimer continued to build the atomic bomb, knowing exactly what it was going to be used for.
It's difficult from their standpoint because it is a job. They do make a living from it. It's just one of those difficult things. Do you want to be a part of a company who stands for that? They think about the money aspect, and it's like, you know, they don't think of the actual social side.
I'm working in a powerhouse, and that's coal fire burning powerhouse, and that's putting pollution in the air. But at the same time, that's putting money in my pocket and helping my kids and having my way of life and living. So it's a double-edged sword. I've been a welder, I work construction ever since I was in high school. What else can I do?
while this installation is physical in nature, what it seeks to do is kind of ground the digital borders that we see online. We see a lot of people talking about this topic, talking about the politics surrounding it, talking about the social implications that surround it, but they don't really have insight onto that project. They don't really understand who is going to be responsible for constructing this border wall, and they've never maybe even seen the border. So what this installation seeks to do is kind of give them a personal standpoint on this, and so they can see an installation, that's 12 feet high and shows you all the different prototypes and the different specifications that are given by the U.S. Customs and Border Patrol for this. And we gathered 255 responses between 2 events, and here are some examples of those responses. You should see the ones I did not include in this. And what we saw was that a lot of guests wanted to respond to the second question, which was asking them to say something to an engineer or engineering company working on the border wall. Our first question was what we were more interested in as, engineering and STEM disciplines, but only a small percentage of people were willing to answer that. A lot of people were more provoked to say something directly to someone who was working on the wall. In order of most common to least common, this is kind of the breakdown of the top 3 topics that we received from our responses. Not surprisingly, immigration was the most talked about topic surrounding this project, with 38.4% of respondents talking about immigration. The second was patrons suggesting that the wall won't serve the intended purpose of keeping immigrants out of the country. And the third were people critiquing or questioning the ethics, empathy, and values of the contributors to the wall. This example on the top left, it exemplifies something that would be coded as immigration. And then the one on the bottom shows one that would be coded as someone saying that it won't serve the intended purpose. And then on the top right, it shows someone that would be saying something about ethics, empathy, and values of the contributors. From these 255 responses and the 11 unique codes, we then narrowed it down to main content themes. And some of these themes were, as you can see, politics and policy, motivations, ethics, and purpose, and then design effectiveness and impacts. And then lastly was miscellaneous. These were all the codes that didn't really relate to the questions we asked. Design effectiveness and impacts could encompass something maybe like how the border wall was being designed, the actual specifications of the design, how effective they would be, and maybe the environmental impact. Whereas politics and policy could encompass immigration. And then motivations, ethics, and purpose could be those codes that were critiquing the ethics and values of the contributors. Overall, the response was definitely not what we anticipated, but very fascinating to us nonetheless. Reflecting on the project, we recognize that this 12-foot towering installation is very emotionally provoking and controversial to a lot of people, and this kind of triggered a response that we didn't think we would get. And this may serve to explain the disproportionate answering of the certain questions, whereas you saw a large majority of people were answering the second question, asking you to directly comment to a contributor. This reaction is a phenomenon that's been studied by other academics as well. Dr. Iwanita explains, anytime our emotional structures experience danger, fear, or anxiety, effects that are all too common in discussions of systematic oppression, our capacity to integrate knowledge and participate in communicative acts also tends to diminish. And in order to mitigate the skewed response in the future, we plan to collect data differently and also ask better questions. As you can see, a lot of the answers we got in the video were very robust and they were considered of both questions, so we think that that's the way we're gonna move for data collection in the future. The biggest thing we noticed as facilitators of this project is that when given the opportunity, people do want to discuss these topics, even if they're not from engineering background, even if they're not, engaged in this topic politically. And this public dialogue is crucial for the future of these projects, especially with the US-Mexico border wall. Engineers build the world, but we don't always include the world in what we build. And for engineers and firms, it is important to provide a platform for this dialogue to continue to happen. And we need to listen as engineers and constructors and STEM individuals to what the public has to say so that we can best serve the community and public interests. That being said, we want to ask you to join us. We want to call for collaboration to install this installation in other areas. We want it to visit many communities, and we want to get more feedback and keep this dialogue going. We have a foundational package compiled that allows you to replicate this, so if anyone's interested in doing that, we can send it over to you. And then if you or your institutions would be interested in that, please let me know or reach out to my team. Thank you so much for your time. Please feel free to reach out to me by email, and please be sure to visit reengineered.org.